about William? Because he's the heir to the. You know, there's been so many heirs over the years. I mean, he's in a he's not in the same situation as his father was. But could you see any resemblance with William with past historical figures?
Well, he has two things, or maybe two and a half, that that mark him out as different in a positive way. The first is that it has been it's been quite a long time since there has been an heir, a Prince of Wales, who was known to be the next in line and who was happily married.
Right.
You know, there was the future Elizabeth II was the Duchess of Edinburgh. You know, Charles had a period where he was married to Diana, and then obviously it fell apart very dramatically. So you're going back to really his great-great-grandfather, George V, is the last one of whom you can say that with his wife, Princess Mary, future Queen Mary. The other things that I think are really interesting, just from a historian's perspective, and I think probably from yours as well, of seeing where it will go in the future, is who his mentors were, his political mentor and his emotional mentor.
Right.
So, you know, we know that William had a great amount of time with his grandmother, Elizabeth II. She would have lunches with him, they would speak together often, and she did try to explain the mechanics of the institution he will lead. And learning about the mechanics of monarchy from Elizabeth II must be like learning about music from Mozart. In that sense, he's had a great deal of political and constitutional mentoring from a very successful, very popular monarch, who I would say was sort of a conservative figure with a small c, not in any way linked to the political party, but did not believe in radical change for its sake within the monarchy. One of his emotional mentors, of course, was his late mother. And I think people often tend to forget that, because in the same way we tend to slot the Princess of Wales and the Duchess of Sussex into these historical archetypes, we've kind of done the same with the Prince of Wales and the Duke of Sussex. We now see William as Charles's son and Harry as Diana's son, and we sort of forget where they have similarities to the other parent. You know, William was immensely close to his mother, and Diana was someone who was more of a radical royal compared to Elizabeth II. So he has these two very different influences. And that, I think, makes him exciting as a future king, because potentially, if he welds those two legacies of the sort of the willingness to change that Diana had, but the enthusiasm for tradition that Elizabeth II had, he could prove, I think, hugely successful as King William V.
That's fascinating. I've never really pieced that together in my mind when you combine, you know, the qualities of Charles and the qualities of Diana. When I know you'd say that Harry often gets, you know, he often talks about his mother more than William does, I think. But when I see William on jobs, you know, up close, he does remind me of Diana. Although I never saw Diana actually on an engagement, he does, the way he speaks to people, the way his eyes move, the way he moves his head, he actually has more of a resemblance, I think, than Harry does. The way he acts with people as well, generally, it's something that doesn't really get picked up on, but I notice it so often. I think he acts like Diana when he's with children and when he's with people.
You're not. I've heard that from other people before. Okay. That actually he has that kind. Yeah, that's interesting.
It's that little glint.
Yeah, it's something about the movement of the head as well. Apparently, I've heard that.
But he has that kind of affection, that kind of authenticity when he talks to people that he actually, you know, they like him.
Do you think? I mean, this is your area of expertise, because I don't really know what I think of this. Do you think it translates onto camera with William, or do you think it's more impressive when you see it in person?
He's bigger than you think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think you have to see him in person. I think people come away. There's often a thrill, like meeting a rock star and when you meet a royal. But when he's spoken to people on walkabouts, and that the people that have actually met him face to face, that they've had, you know, an incredible time. And you can tell they're almost speechless. And I think you're right. I think it translates better when it's face to face. On camera, it might be, you know, more difficult to spot. But I look forward to more jobs with William, and I will tell you about them when next time we meet. But yeah, honestly, he does come across more like Diana.
It's so interesting. That's really interesting.
Now, the King and Prince William showed, you know, a real kind of public display of unity this week with the unveiling of William in charge of the Army Air Corps. This massive contrast to his relationship that we've seen with Prince Harry in the last couple of weeks. How do we break this down?
Well, I think within the monarchy's framework, it's logical that it goes to Prince William. You know, the king had it when he was Prince of Wales. He spoke about that. I think some people have seen it as a bit of a slight on the Duke of Sussex, but as he's no longer a working royal, I think it was always pretty natural that it would go to William. But I do think that point about how close the king and the Prince of Wales seemed, and that very obvious affection between them, that was pretty palpable watching it.
Well, it's a thing. I mean, it goes back to the coronation.
Yeah.
When William, I think he kissed him on the cheek, and then the king, said thank you to his son. There's been, maybe lots of debate over the kind of years about the relationship between Charles and his two sons, or which one is the favourite. But it's the fact that William is the heir, isn't it? And William has to kind of fulfil the role, of backing up Charles. How do you think William is doing at the moment? Do you think he's really stepping up at the moment? Or?
It's a great question. Yeah, I think he is. I mean, look, I think many people will be aware of how difficult it is in any position, much less a public-facing one, when you have a loved one, in his case, two loved ones, dealing with cancer. But I do think we're seeing him more publicly visible, more publicly confident. And that transition from him being Duke of Cambridge and being second in line to first in line is quite a big one. I think it was always a kind of understanding that the second in line in that younger generation is given a bit more time for their family, because eventually that will be ceded to the public responsibility. So that's what you're seeing happen at the moment. And I suppose, also it's that what we saw this week really was also a moment of him standing next to the king, who has been out of public visibility for a while. So it was two different kinds of public visibility that you saw.
You are the Queen Mother expert, basically.
That's right.
You are the Queen Mother expert, and there's a wonderful book you've written about the Queen Mother. Can you tell us your favourite stories? I don't want to put you under pressure or under the spotlight, but you're a big fan of the Queen Mother.
But
you're not just a fan, but obviously a biographer. What are your highlights of her life? Whether they're funny, whether they're sad, or impactful on society?
Yeah, do you know, it's funny when you spend that amount of time with people spectrally when you're writing about them, and then by the end of it, you're like, I need you to leave me alone, and I need to never see your name again. And I didn't really feel that way with her. I actually ended up admiring her a lot more emerging from it, than I had going into it. And the book, Let's Have Another Drink, is like 101 anecdotes from some one chapter per decade of her life. And I think some of the stuff about, just what she went through in the First World War, and the brothers, that one was killed in the trenches, two had PTSD, one had alcoholism, one was a POW, and this really moving letter that she writes when she says, I was 17 years old and I thought I will never be happy again. And she said every day you heard someone died. And I think that explains a little bit of when she could seem steelier and tough. And it's not just her, it's that generation. You can't really empathise with sort of the touchy-feeliness of the 80s and 90s when you grew up every day hearing someone else had been blown apart in the trenches. There were some great stories about her. I can't. One of them involves swearing, so I can't say it. But she was at Balmoral, and they were out, and there was sort of one of the little bothies that they were going to, and one of the Queen had forgotten to bring the key, even though the Queen Mother had said bring it, and it was raining down on all of them, and there was a ghillie inside. So they tried to open the door, and the ghillie shouted, "Who the F is it?" The Queen Mother trilled, "Don't worry, it's only the Queen." The ghillie sort of launched himself to get it done. The one that's probably most famous, I think people enjoy, is that she had on her staff two gay men who were on again, off again boyfriends, and they were on getting to off stage, and they were arguing, and they forgot to bring the Queen Mother her drink, and she sailed out, a waft of pastels, and she said, "When you two old queens have finished fighting, will you get this old queen her drink?" So she had a good sense of humour. She was just remarkable. I mean, I liked her. I mean, she certainly, I think, was tough, really, really tough. And as I said, I don't think that's necessarily to her demerit, but she was utterly fascinating to write about, Matt. She really was.
Well, it's interesting because she's often forgotten now. With all the characters that we have, with Harry and Meghan and the Princess of Wales, she's someone that has such a huge, important role. Saw everything happen over her lifetime and was right there at the front seat. It's good that she is remembered. But listen, Gareth, thanks very much.
Thanks so much.
I've had a pleasure. We've made history.
We've
covered a lot of stuff. So I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks. Had a great time. Thanks for having me.